Hi, in this tutorial, we're going to be covering off call reluctance, and we're going to break it down to a bit about the psychology behind it, what causes it, what's sort of driving it, and then what you can do about it. Before we jump into it, let's kind of discuss briefly what is call reluctance. Well, call reluctance is when, as an accountant, for example, or advisor, you've gone through the process of identifying your target clients, you've done all the research, you've got some scripts, maybe you've done a bit of rehearsal, and it's literally the point where you're now going to reach out to a business owner, whether it be an existing or new, and ask them if they're open to having a conversation with you. And all of a sudden, it's like, I'm pretty busy. And we'll talk about what's going on there in a moment. But that's the kind of the issue we're talking about is this: why won't you follow through on the task? And it can occur for very seasoned salespeople. It's very common. So that's why we're going to cover it off today. So before we jump into it, there's a bit about the psychology that we need to understand, because that's kind of what underpins this whole topic. So if we think about our psyche structure, it's made up of three components. So we've got our id, or instinctual drives, ego, and superego. So the instinctual drives, primary drives are self-preservation, social, and sexual. But in essence, what we're talking about is our drive primarily toward pleasure and to avoid pain, right? We all know that one. So that's the essence of the instinctual drives. Then we have the ego, and the role of the ego is to kind of make sense of the world. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we have our superego, and that develops around about age 6. And in there, we start to sort of adopt, let's call them society's rules or values. And that's where, from a professional point of view, that's where our professional self-image resides. So think of the ego. So one of the critical functions of the ego is what we call the reality function test, which is why your psychopaths will act out on behavior, because they're unable to distinguish between the internal dialogue and their instinctual drives and their reality. So kind of you could think of the ego as almost like trying to mediate between two arguing parties. You've got your instinctual drives forcing all these desires, and they're very powerful. And then we have the social construct, if you like, from the superego trying to, back it back down or make sense of it. And then you've got the egos trying to work between the two. So when we talk about what's happening with around call reluctance, right? So we've got this conversation going between the ego, the id, and the superego, as an example. So what are the communication styles like? Well, generally we have three styles. So they tend to either be assertive, withdrawn, or dutiful. So assertive is like moving toward, withdrawn's moving away, and dutiful is kind of like trying to go in the middle, a bit like the id, the superego, and the ego, if you get my drift. So they're our manipulation styles, and we use them and refer to them as a manipulation style, because if you're communicating with somebody in a withdrawn style, you're still communicating, but you're attempting to remove yourself from position. So you'll use different tactics. Maybe you'll use, your quieter periods, or you'll be less confrontational, or you'll be much more agreeable, and so on. The whole point around that is to get away from the confrontation. So we have those manipulation styles, and funnily enough, our ego adopts them internally as well. We then, on top of that, have three kind of coping styles. And you can tend to have like a positive outlook, or you could have what we call an intensity, and then you could have, let's call it competency-based. So positive outlook, as the name suggests, something's going wrong. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. I don't really want to deal with the issue, so we'll just make it look it's going to be all right. Then there's the other extreme, which is more intensity. These are people that want to blow up. They're like, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. So they really want to vent. They want everybody else to know that things are bad. So if they're having a bad day, everybody around them has to have a bad day. You got to know that I'm feeling bad. And then there are others, if we're like this competency based, they're like, well, whatever it is, let's get feelings, get rid of them. Let's just get a plan. Let's figure it out. And obviously we should be adopting, all parts of all three when solving problems. So what's going on with call reluctance? We said we were going to contact these people. We know we need to do it. We see all the benefits from it. We get to the end, and then we don't take the step. What's going on? Well, there's a couple of things, but fundamentally our id is firing to try. We want to avoid the pain. And the pain are, remember, self-preservation, social, sexual. So that social bit around rejection, acceptance. And then at the same time, you've got your superego, society's orders. And that's where we come and say, well, if you phoned someone out of the blue, that'd be terribly rude, wouldn't it? And, if you really had status and position and hierarchy, well, you wouldn't be reaching out to people, they'd be coming to you. And so we have these two kind of pushes going. And at the same time, the ego's going, yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to ring this person and get rejection. But the same token, oh, wouldn't it be bad if I did ring them and they thought worse of me? And then it's, oh, but I thought I was going to get this thing done. And then now it turns into guilt and shame, and it just becomes really traumatic. So that's what kind of causes it, and that's kind of what's going on. So for many people, it's like, well, who haven't been through it or don't understand. Well, let me get this straight. You're upset because you're not making enough sales, you're not getting enough revenue, and you're getting pressure from your bosses, and things aren't going well. And that if you make more sales calls, eventually you'll get more sales and you make more money and you get promoted. So remind me again why you're not making the calls. Because my ego is trying to protect my sense of self. My ego is trying to stop me from feeling those negative feelings. And it's trying to placate and fit in with my social, my superego position. So it's telling me to do nothing. Now, remember we talked about manipulation styles, assertive, withdrawn, and dutiful. So this is where the dutiful kicks in, because you get to sit in the middle, right? Assertive is like, get on with it, make the calls, do it. Withdrawn is, run, hide, do nothing. Can't run and hide, do nothing, because I told everyone I was going to do it. And I promise, actually, it's my job. But I don't really want to get on with it, so I'll do this dutiful thing. What does that mean? Oh, there's a job over there. Oh, I've got to go and do that. But hang a minute, you said you were going to do this job, and it's really important. And it's going to benefit you and the firm and the client. Yeah. I'll do that later. I've got to do this job, because this job allows me to avoid the feelings of pain and so on, avoid the feeling of guilt of avoidance. And I've got a billable hour. So there's a story I can use to back myself up here. So I'm going to go and do this job. And so pretty quickly you find all sorts of menial jobs, and some are perfectly valid, but let's face it, it's often an excuse, because you could just quickly make a call, then go back and do that job. Oh, no, that doesn't fit part of the story. So our brain is going, yeah, but if we do that, that's going to make me feel bad. So let's just not do that. We'll go do this. We know deep down what we're doing, but we can kind of get away with it. So that's call reluctance, what drives it and what's going on. So what do we do about it? Well, the essence of the call reluctance is, how will I be seen in the approach? How will I be judged? And then how will I feel or cope with the rejection? So there's two things. How will I be seen and how will I be judged in the approach? Simple. Make your approaches driven with a degree of curiosity and a bit of fun. Make it lighthearted for you and the other person, because that's not normally how business is done. So that makes it easier. So you'll see elsewhere in our resource, we talk about using gift approach letters. They're kind of whimsical, a bit different, small gift in a courier bag. So it creates a bit of curiosity, and it's different, easy to follow up, drives the behavior. Everything's covered in other sections. But in essence, you're using tactics that don't fit the norm of the high pressure salesperson, if we like. So I'm using tactics that don't look like that. Therefore, you won't think I'm that. Therefore, you'll judge me different. That's kind of the essence of it. And it's true, by the way. On top of that, we then say, right, well, if I have certain, target criteria, and then my follow-up is, look, if it's not convenient for you now, or if you don't have the bandwidth or the mind, headspace at the moment to take on this idea, why don't we just stay in touch? So again, use tactics that take out the heat. So basically, be more professional in the approach. We've got all the tools and advisory to show you elsewhere, but be more professional in the approach, in the tactics, and in the phone script. So for example, the phone scripts, you really have to make certain that right at the beginning, for example, you do little things like ask them if it's okay for them to speak, if they've got time. Explain to them that you're not going to be there all day. So again, this is all in our scripts, but make it really clear up front. Why? Two reasons. First of all is that you're actually letting them know that you're being more professional and that you're not going to, interrupt them. And in the genuine case where they're in the middle of something, you can ring them back. But the second reason is that you hear yourself using tactics that are more professional. So you're acting professionally, so you'll make it associate to being professional, right? So the tactics you use really help overcome it. And then the other side is, part of the issue is, if I go after the sale or this opportunity and it doesn't come off, I get the confrontation not only in the short term of the rejection, but then I do the math to figure out, well, that's a person that I was relying on. I was kind of hoping that they would want to see me, and then that could turn into business, and then I'd feel good. But now that business opportunity's gone, and now I feel bad because it's confirmation that I'm not moving toward my goal. So therefore, I start to equate every time I ring someone and get a no, it's telling me I'm going to fail, which is, of course, what we're all going to try to avoid. So along with the better tactics, what we need to do is make sure that we have a bigger target list. You need to have 50 to 60 leads or prospects that you've researched in your sort of bag, if you like, at any given time. So this means, yes, there's a lot of research work required. You might start with, 180 names to narrow down to 60 that you even think are worth phoning, right? But you don't contact anyone until you've built up about 60. And then when you release these packages that we've talked about elsewhere, you do it in blocks of 10. Why? So that no single response ties you down. But also, that even if you send 10, you've still got 40 or 50 left to go. So what it does is it takes out that kind of finality. And then what we do is we go, well, okay, I've taken 10 out of there to send them there. I've got those ones are in the marketplace. I'm going to work through the process of having the meetings and contacting them. But while that's going on, I'm going to go back and get another 10 researched names in my kitty. So I'm always keeping a balance, right? So what this says to the brain is there's opportunities everywhere. There's businesses everywhere. And then as I start getting success and growing out of here and I start using my other tactics, it all feeds into the system, and it's about driving the sense of control. So ultimately what we want is a sense that I can control my destiny. If I set this target, I can make it happen. And we can do that. And there's always trial and error, but we can do it if we understand that we have to take the action. When we don't take the action, it becomes debilitating and guilt-ridden. We have to understand, where's that coming from? It's actually our ego trying to help us avoid those bad feelings. And that's fine in that moment. But what we need to do is use the other two tactics to work our way around it. Eventually, if you've got all your names and you've got the tactics, it really does come down to, right, almost a degree of curiosity. Hey, let's make 10 calls using this script. Let's contact 10 businesses of this type. Let's use this gift. And then at 10, we're going to review, did people agree to meet us? Did we get in there and we were talking to the wrong people? If we didn't get in there to meet, what was the nature of the industry? Like, what can we learn about this? So if we bring in curiosity, not judgment, then we're able to just hone it and develop it over time. So that's how we get around call reluctance. And what you'll find is once you start making active, outgoing calls and you start engaging with people, you pretty quickly start to understand that, right, well, I know that if we strip all the emotion out of it, this is just a statistical game, right? Let the numbers do the working. I know if I contacted 100 quality business people, what I'm looking for is not somebody who wants to buy something today, because I've got no way of knowing that. What I'm looking for is somebody who's willing to engage. And so we've got to find someone who's willing to engage must have something that they are wanting more of or trying to have less of or avoid, right? We know that's what's going on in the world. So we need to tailor our approach, tailor our offer, maintain a professional tactics. We do that eventually, we're going to find people that are looking for something because it's human nature. So if we understand, well, we're trying to find people that fundamentally are driven to do what we do, either achieve, through our support more or through our support have less of something. And then if we understand that's what's driving them, then we know it's just a numbers game from there. So hopefully that's given you some idea around what drives the call reluctance and what you can do about it. Look forward to seeing you in the next session. Bye for now.